Muna had been watching him for 3 weeks. Not because she was suspicious. Not because some quiet voice in the back of her mind had been whispering warnings she refused to hear. She had been watching him because she loved him. The way a woman loves a man she has built a life with. Completely. Foolishly. With both hands. She stood in the doorway of their bedroom and watched Derek sleep. His chest rose and fell. His face was smooth, unbothered. He looked like a man with nothing to hide. That was the first lie. She already knew about the second. The message had come to his personal tablet 2 nights ago, a device he kept locked, password protected, buried under a pile of documents on his side of the study. But Derek was careless in the way only truly arrogant men are. He had left the tablet unlocked while he stepped out to take a call. Muna had gone in to retrieve a pen. She had seen the screen. She had not meant to read it. But she had. I missed you last night. Same time tomorrow? She still doesn't know anything. Muna stood there in the quiet of the morning, looking at her sleeping husband, and she felt something in her chest go very, very still. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She did something more dangerous. She smiled. And she started making plans. If you're new here, welcome. Hit that subscribe button right now and turn on your notifications, because this story is going to keep you absolutely glued from beginning to end. She confronted him that evening. She had thought carefully about how to do it. She had considered waiting, gathering more evidence, building a case. But she was not a patient woman by nature. She was careful. There was a difference. And after 3 days of careful waiting, she was done. Derek came home at 7:30, loosening his tie at the door, already scrolling through his phone. He didn't look up when she stepped into the hallway. We need to talk, Muna said. Something shifted in his posture. Barely. But she saw it. I'm tired, Muna. Can it wait? It really can't. She placed the printed message on the console table between them. She had photographed it from his tablet before he locked it again. She had printed 2 copies and mailed one to herself, just so it would exist somewhere he couldn't reach. Derek looked at the paper. He looked at her. For exactly 3 seconds, his face did something genuine, something she had not seen from him in a very long time. Fear. Then it was gone. That's not what you think it is, he said. Tell me what it is then. You're overreacting. You've been overreacting to everything lately. He set his phone down slowly. I've been worried about you, Muna. For weeks. She felt the air in the room change. Worried about me. Yes. He stepped toward her with the calm of a man who had rehearsed this. I've spoken to Dr. Haeun. About your behavior. The paranoia. The mood swings. He agrees you've been showing signs of instability. Signs. Her voice stayed even. What signs? I have documentation. I didn't want to bring it up tonight, but since you want to do this, he picked up his phone and made a call. 1 call. Short. 2 words. She's ready. Muna looked at him. Who did you just call? The front door opened behind her. 2 men in white uniforms stepped in. Behind them, a woman with a clipboard and a calm, clinical face. Behind her, 2 private security guards Muna had never seen before. Mr. Derek, the woman with the clipboard said. Is this the patient? Patient. Muna's voice broke on the word, not from weakness, but from pure disbelief. Derek. What is this? It's help, he said. You need help, Muna. I've been trying to tell you. I am not your patient. I am your wife. You've been having episodes. His voice dropped, soft and terrible. You haven't been sleeping. You've been going through my things. You cornered my assistant last week and accused her of things she didn't do. Dr. Haeun has everything documented. This is a voluntary admission. I am not going anywhere voluntarily. He nodded at the security guards. She fought. She screamed. She called his name, not with love, but with fury, with clarity, with the full force of a woman who knew exactly what was being done to her and refused to pretend otherwise. The neighbors heard. A door across the hall opened, then quickly closed. No one came. They put her in a black car with tinted windows. They drove for 40 minutes. They brought her through a side entrance of a building with no visible signage, up an elevator that required a key card, and into a room with 1 window and a lock on the outside of the door. The woman with the clipboard patted her hand. "You'll feel better soon," she said. Then she left. And the lock turned. The room smelled like antiseptic and artificial lavender. The window looked out over a gray courtyard. The bed had rails on the sides. The walls were a color someone had once decided was calming. Muna sat on the edge of the bed and breathed. She had cried in the car. She was done crying now. She looked at the room the way a chess player looks at a board. She counted the tiles on the floor. She noted the position of the camera in the corner, high, angled toward the bed. She noted the small gap under the door where a light from the corridor leaked through. She noted the brand of the lock from the sound it made when it turned. She was still wearing her own clothes. That was something. A nurse came in an hour later with a small paper cup. 2 white tablets. "What are these?" Muna asked. "To help you rest." "I don't want to rest. I want to speak to a lawyer." "That can be arranged tomorrow." The nurse set the cup down. "Dr. Yoon will see you in the morning. For now, you need rest." Muna looked at the tablets. She looked at the nurse's face, young, tired, following instructions she hadn't written. "Okay," Muna said. She palmed the tablets under her tongue and swallowed the water. When the nurse left, she spat them into her hand and tucked them under the mattress. She was not going to sleep. She was going to watch and think and wait. Derek thought he had buried her. He had miscalculated. 3 miles across the city, in the basement level of a building that looked from the outside like a shuttered boutique hotel, a different kind of evening was beginning. The sign above the door read nothing. There was no sign. There was only a matte black door, a single camera mounted above the frame, and a man in a dark suit who did not smile and did not ask questions, only checked faces against a list that existed nowhere in writing. Inside, the Midnight Orchid was everything the street above it was not. The ceilings were high, lined with curved timber beams lacquered to a dark shine. Between the beams, cascades of dried orchids, white, deep purple, black-tipped, hung like frozen waterfalls. The bar itself was pale stone, lit from below. The bottles arranged behind it were not labeled. The bartenders worked in silence. In the private room at the back, past the jazz quartet, past the low velvet booths, past a door that looked like a wall, a man sat alone. He had a glass of water in front of him. Not whiskey. Water. His name was Dae Haeun. He was 34 years old. He had not smiled in public in 6 years, a fact that several journalists had noted and none of them understood. He owned this bar the way he owned 17 other things quietly, completely, with no visible attachment. Across from him sat a man named Counselor Beck, who was sweating through his collar despite the air conditioning. "She was committed tonight," Beck said. "Private facility. Byungmun Clinic, North District." Derek handled it himself. Dae Haeun turned his glass slowly on the table. He said nothing. "I thought you should know," Beck continued. "Given the history." "Who signed the admission papers?" "Dr. Yoon. He's on Derek's payroll. Has been for 2 years. Does she have anyone who knows where she is?" Beck shifted in his seat. "That's the point. She doesn't." Dae Haeun was quiet for a long moment. "What room?" he said finally. "4th floor. East wing. Room 412. Dae Haeun nodded once. "That's all." Beck stood, relieved to be dismissed. He straightened his jacket and moved toward the door. "Beck." Dae Haeun didn't look up. "Don't mention this conversation to anyone. Not to your wife. Not to your driver. Not to God." Beck left without answering. Dae Haeun picked up his glass of water and set it back down without drinking from it. His jaw tightened for a moment, a movement so small that only someone watching very closely would have caught it. He picked up his phone. He sent a single message to a number with no name attached. "Find out who she trusts." Then he folded his hands on the table and sat in the silence of the Midnight Orchid, and he waited. 7 days passed. In that time, Muna learned several things. She learned that the facility ran on a tight schedule, medication rounds at 7, 11, and 8, with a 30-minute gap between the nurses' rounds and the shift change at each interval. She learned that the camera in her room had a blind spot in the lower left corner near the radiator. She learned that the orderly who worked the East Wing on Tuesdays and Thursdays, a young man named Femi, who hummed to himself as he mopped the corridor, was not, in any fundamental way, loyal to the institution. He was loyal to his mother's medical bills and to the idea that the world was not entirely unjust. She spent 3 days talking to Femi before she asked him anything. She talked about his mother first. She asked him her name. She asked what she liked to watch on weekends. She told him about her own mother, who had died when she was 9, who had loved Puff Puff and terrible evening soap operas, and who had called Muna her small general, because even as a little girl, Muna had never cried without a reason. By the 4th day, Femi was leaving her door slightly unlatched when he mopped outside. By the 6th day, she had asked him to mail a letter. She had written it on the back of a medication information leaflet using a pen she had lifted from a distracted nurse's tray. The letter was addressed to a woman named Cece, her oldest friend, sharp-tongued and fiercely loyal, who worked as a paralegal and who had, notably, never liked Derek. The letter said only, "I am in Byongmun Clinic, North District, 4th floor East. I am not ill. Get me out or get me a lawyer. Tell no one else. Burn this after. M." On day 7, a visitor came. Not Cece. A man. He was shown into the consultation room, which meant he had the right paperwork, which meant he had connections that Muna could not immediately trace. He wore a dark jacket, no tie, and the kind of stillness that some men are born with and others spend decades trying to manufacture. He sat down across the table from Muna and looked at her with dark, level eyes. "You look better than I expected," he said. "You expected me to look broken. I expected you to look frightened." "I'm not frightened," she said. "I'm working." "Who are you?" He leaned back slightly. Something moved at the corner of his mouth, not quite a smile. "Someone who knows what Derek did." "And why?" Muna studied his face. "You're going to have to do much better than that. My name is Dae Haeun. I own the Midnight Orchid on Jongyo. You've never been there, but you walked past it once, for years ago, on a Tuesday evening in October. You were arguing with someone on the phone. You were wearing a yellow coat." She stared at him. "I have a very good memory," he said. "You've been watching me." Knowing of someone is not the same as watching them. He placed both hands flat on the table, a deliberate gesture, she noted. "No aggression. I know what Derek is building. I know what he needs your absence to accomplish. And I know something about you that he either doesn't know or doesn't think matters." "What do you know about me?" He looked at her steadily. "That you are not who he told you are." The room went very quiet. Muna felt the back of her neck prickle. "What does that mean?" "It means," Dae Haeun said carefully, "that you should get out of this facility before he realizes his plan has a crack in it. Once you're out, I'll tell you everything." He slid a folded piece of paper across the table. "There is a window on the east stairwell. 3rd floor. It faces the service alley. The latch is broken. Tonight, between 11:15 and 11:40, the camera on that stairwell will experience a technical interruption lasting exactly 20 minutes. Muna looked at the paper. She looked at him. "Why?" she said. "Why are you doing this?" "Because 20 years ago, someone did something for my family that I have never been able to repay." He stood. "Consider this the beginning of repayment." He left. Muna sat with the folded paper in her hands. She did not open it. She already knew what it said. She was out of that building before midnight. The service alley behind Byongmun Clinic was cold and smelled of kitchen waste and damp concrete. Muna dropped from the 3rd floor window ledge, caught the drain pipe, and slid the last meter and a half with her palms burning. She landed on both feet, absorbed the impact, and straightened. She stood still for 5 seconds, listening. Nothing came. No alarm. No shouting. She pulled the hood of the borrowed orderly's jacket over her head and walked. She walked for 11 blocks before she stopped at a convenience store and used cash she had found in the jacket pocket, Femi's cash, she realized, which meant he had known, which meant she owed him more than a letter, to buy a prepaid phone card and a bottle of water. She called Cece from a payphone outside. Cece answered on the 2nd ring. "Where are you?" Sesay's voice was barely controlled. "I got your letter. I've been out of my mind." "I'm out," Muna said. I need 3 things. A place to sleep that Derek doesn't know about. A way to access the account he doesn't know I have. And everything you can find on a Dr. Yoon who works private psychiatric admissions. A pause. The account from your mother? Cece asked. Yes. Muna. Sesay's voice dropped. How bad is this? Bad enough that he had me locked in a facility for a week to keep me out of the way. She kept her voice steady. He's building something, Cece. Something that needs me silent. I need to find out what before he realizes I'm gone. Another pause. Shorter. I have a cousin in Mapogu, Cece said. He travels for work. His apartment is empty. I have a key. That works. And Muna. Sesay's voice tightened. Don't go back to your house. Don't go anywhere he knows. He is people. Muna thought of the 2 security guards who had stepped through her front door like they already owned it. I know, she said. I'll be careful. She hung up. She stood in the cold street, the city moving around her like it hadn't noticed that her entire life had been dismantled and reassembled in the wrong shape. She felt the cold in her hands and the soreness in her palms from the drain pipe and the particular sharpness of a mind that has been kept deliberately idle for 7 days and is now, finally, fully awake. She thought of Dae Haeun's face. The stillness of him. The way he had said you are not who he told you are quietly, without drama, the way people say things they have known for a long time and are finally allowed to say out loud. She thought about that for a long time as she walked toward Mapogu. Derek didn't discover she was gone until morning. She knew this because Cece had a contact inside the facility, a filing clerk who noticed things and liked Cece and liked the small gifts Cece brought her, who sent a single message at 6:47 a.m. Patient in 412 gone. Administrator called Mr. Derek at 6:30. He is very angry. Muna read the message on the prepaid phone Cece had brought her the night before and felt a cold, clean satisfaction move through her. Good. Let him be angry. Anger made men careless. And careless men left trails. She was sitting at the small kitchen table in Sesay's cousin's apartment with 3 things in front of her, a cup of black coffee, a notebook, and the beginning of a list. The list had 2 columns. On the left, what she knew. On the right, what she needed to prove it. She uncapped the pen and began to write. Derek had been having an affair. She had evidence of that, the printed message, which she had mailed to herself before the night of her arrest, and which was waiting at the postal collection office under a name Derek did not know she used. Derek had arranged a fraudulent psychiatric admission using a compromised doctor. Evidence, the admission papers, which she had memorized in detail during 7 days of having nothing to do but think. Dr. Yoon. Registration number. Date. Signatures. She wrote it all down. Derek had made a phone call before the men came through her door. That call had lasted under 30 seconds. She needed that call record. She was still writing when her phone rang. The number that appeared was the same number Dae Haeun had given her on the paper in the consultation room. She answered. You made it, he said. Not a question. Did you doubt me? No, a pause. Are you somewhere safe? Safe enough. She tapped her pen against the notebook. You said you'd tell me everything once I was out. I said I'd begin to tell you. He paused again, and she had the impression of a man choosing his words with great precision. Not over the phone. Can you come to the Orchid tonight? The bar where you conduct mysterious meetings in private rooms? Yes. What time? 10. She looked at her list. She looked at the 2 columns. She thought about a yellow coat and a Tuesday evening 4 years ago and a man with a very good memory. I'll be there, she said. She hung up and picked up her pen. She had 7 hours. She was going to use all of them. She spent the morning at the postal collection office, retrieving the envelope she had mailed to herself. She tucked it into the inner pocket of the jacket Cece had brought her and did not let herself feel relief yet. Relief was for later. For now, she needed to move. She spent the afternoon with Cece in a small cafe 3 stops from Mapogu, going through everything Cece had found on Dr. Yoon. It was more than Muna had hoped for. Dr. Yoon had 2 malpractice complaints filed against him in the past 5 years, both withdrawn under circumstances that the filing records described as resolved privately. He had a clinic license that had been under review 18 months ago and had been cleared without explanation. He had a second address registered in his wife's name in a district that did not match his stated income. He's been bought before, Cece said. Derek isn't the first. No, Muna agreed. But Derek is the one I care about. She photographed every document. She emailed copies to an address only she could access. She wrote Dr. Yun's registration number on her wrist in ballpoint pen because she was not yet ready to trust technology with everything. By 8 o'clock, she was back at the apartment, changed into clothes Cece had packed: dark trousers, a plain blouse, flat shoes. Nothing that belonged to the life Derek had built around her. Nothing he would recognize. By 9:30, she was in a cab heading toward Jongno. By 10, she was standing in front of a matte black door with no sign above it, in a street that looked like it had never heard of whatever was happening behind that door. The man in the dark suit looked at her face. He stepped aside. The Midnight Orchid was nothing like she had imagined and exactly like she should have expected. The dried orchids. The pale stone bar. The music moving through the air like something half-remembered. The quiet that had nothing to do with silence and everything to do with a room full of people who knew better than to be loud. A woman appeared at her elbow, young, efficient, expressionless. This way, she said. She led Muna through the room, past the bar, past the low booths, to a door that looked like a wall until it didn't. The private room was smaller than the one at the clinic. Better lit. A low table, 2 chairs, a pot of tea already poured. Dae Haeun was standing when she entered. He was wearing all black, and in the warm light of the room he looked less like a man conducting business and more like a man who had been waiting a long time for something and had finally run out of patience with the waiting. You came, he said. You have information I need, she said. I came for that. He gestured toward the chair. She sat. He sat across from her and poured tea into both cups, even though she hadn't said she wanted any. She picked it up anyway. Her hands were steadier than she expected. Tell me, she said. He looked at her for a moment, the same level, unhurried look from the consultation room. 20 years ago, he said, your mother saved my father's life. Muna went very still. My father was a man named Dae Sungo. He came to Seoul from Busan in the late 90s with very little and built something real here. But in 2004, he was targeted by a group of men who wanted what he had built. They set him up. Fraud charges fabricated. He was going to prison. Dae Haeun set down his cup. A woman came forward with evidence that contradicted everything. She testified. She lost her job for it. She was threatened and she testified anyway. Her name was Adiz. Muna's throat tightened. My mother's name was Adiz, she said quietly. I know. She never told me. She wouldn't have. That was who she was. His voice was even, but something moved underneath it. My father recovered everything. He built more. He died 8 years ago, having never stopped looking for a way to repay a woman who refused to be found. He paused. And then I found you. 3 years ago. And then you married Derek. Muna set down her cup. Derek knows about this, she said. Derek has been looking into your background since before he married you. He found fragments, not everything, but enough. Enough to know that you are the heir to a claim your mother never registered. A legal claim, tied to a land parcel and a corporate structure that my father's company absorbed in 2006. Dae Haeun's jaw tightened. If you make that claim, Muna, if you know to make it, Derek loses access to the asset he has been planning to liquidate for the past 18 months. The room was very quiet. He married me, Muna said slowly, to keep me close enough to control. And when you found the message, and he realized you were no longer controllable, he put me away. Yes. She sat with that for a long moment. The full weight of it. The architecture of a deception she had lived inside without knowing the walls were false. Then she picked up her tea again. What is the claim, she said. Exactly. In legal terms. What am I entitled to? Dae Haeun looked at her, and this time, what moved across his face was not calculation or strategy. It was something that looked very close to respect. 51%, he said, of a holding company called Arium Group, which currently controls 4 commercial properties in Central Seoul, a logistics firm, and a development contract worth significant money. And Derek controls it now? Derek controls 49% and has been operating as if he controls all of it. Because he thought I didn't know. Because he thought no one knew. Dae Haeun leaned forward slightly. But I have my father's records. The original agreement. Your mother's testimony transcripts. And I have a lawyer who has been waiting for you to walk through a door for 3 years. Muna looked at him across the low table, in the warm light of a room that smelled like good tea and dried flowers, and she thought about her mother calling her a small general. She thought about a woman who had testified and lost her job and never told her daughter why. She thought about Derek's face, that 3-second flash of fear before he put it away and made his phone call. All right, she said. All right. I want to see the records. She set down her cup with a clean, decisive sound. All of them. Tonight. For the first time since she had met him, Dae Haeun smiled. It was a small smile. Brief. But it changed his face entirely, and Muna, who was currently building a legal case against her husband and had no business noticing such things, noticed it anyway. I had a feeling you'd say that, he said. Stop being smug, she said. Get the records. He reached for the folder on the chair beside him that she had not noticed until now. He set it on the table between them. She opened it. And the second half of her story began. If you are still watching, and I know you are, drop a comment right now and tell me, did you see Derek's move coming? And are you rooting for Muna? Because the best is absolutely still ahead. Like this video, share it, and stay right here. Muna spent 3 hours going through that folder. Dae Haeun sat across from her the entire time. He refilled her tea twice. He answered every question she asked with a precision that told her he had been preparing for this conversation for a long time. He never rushed her. He never explained things she hadn't asked about. He just waited and watched, and occasionally pointed to a document she had skipped over. By midnight, she had read everything. She closed the folder and sat back. He never thought I'd find out, she said. No. He thought he could keep me confused long enough to push the liquidation through. The signing window closes in 19 days, Dae Haeun said. If you don't file a claim before then, his lawyer argues abandonment and the asset transfers entirely to his holding company. Muna tapped the folder with 2 fingers. And your lawyer. The one who has been waiting. Her name is Attorney Han. She is thorough, she is fast, and she genuinely dislikes Derek, which I find professionally useful. Muna looked at him. You've met Derek. Once. At a function, 2 years ago. He told me about his wife. A pause. He described you as someone who needed a lot of managing. Something flared in her chest. She kept her face still. What did you say? I said that women who need a lot of managing are usually just smarter than the men managing them. He picked up his tea. He laughed. He thought I was joking. Muna was quiet for a moment. Thank you, she said. Not for the records, or the lawyer, or the broken window latch. For that? Dae Haeun looked at her. Don't thank me yet. We still have 19 days. 18, she said. It's after midnight. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, you're going to be fine. He said it simply. Not as reassurance. As fact. The way a person states something they're entirely certain of. Muna picked up the folder and stood. I know, she said. The next morning, she met Attorney Han. Han was a compact woman in her early 50s with short silver-streaked hair and the calm, efficient energy of someone who had won enough courtrooms to stop performing confidence and simply have it. She shook Muna's hand, poured her coffee without asking, and slid a legal pad across the table. Tell me everything, she said. From the beginning. Don't edit. So Muna told her. The message on the tablet. The confrontation. The men in white uniforms. The 7 days in Byungmun. Dr. Yoon. The medication she had palmed. Femi and his mother's medical bills. The window on the east stairwell. Attorney Han wrote without looking up. She did not react to anything. When Muna finished, Han tore the top page off the legal pad, folded it, and set it aside. Okay, Han said. First thing. We file an injunction to freeze all transactions related to Arium Group pending a claim of beneficial ownership. That buys us time and makes Derek very uncomfortable very quickly. She sipped her coffee. Second thing. The psychiatric admission. That's not just a weapon Derek used against you. That's a crime. We are going to document it carefully because we are not just going to win your asset claim. We are going to make sure he can never do this to anyone else. Muna felt something loosen in her chest. Something she hadn't realized was clenched. Third thing, Han said, and her voice softened just slightly. Are you alright? Not legally. As a person. Muna thought about it honestly. I'm getting there, she said. Han nodded. Good enough. She picked up her pen again. Let's get to work. They filed the injunction on a Thursday morning. By Thursday afternoon, Derek knew. Muna knew he knew because Sesay's contact sent a message that said simply, he threw his phone at the wall. Twice. Muna read the message, sitting in the small kitchen in Mapogu, and felt a bright, clean ripple of satisfaction move through her from head to toe. She allowed herself exactly 30 seconds to enjoy it. Then she made a list of the next 5 things she needed to do. What she had not expected was that Derek would try to reach her directly. The message came through a number she didn't recognize, but the words were unmistakably his. The tone she had once thought was confidence and had slowly understood was something much smaller. We can fix this. You're making a mistake. Call me. She stared at the message for a long time. Then she forwarded it to Attorney Han with a single note. Add this to the file. And then she blocked the number. She saw Dae Haeun again 4 days later. Not at the Orchid. He had texted that morning asking if she wanted to walk, just walk, in Buckshin, where the old houses line the narrow streets and the city felt briefly like it had taken a breath. She had almost said no. Then she had said yes. They walked for an hour without talking much. That was the thing she had not expected about him. The silence was easy. It didn't pull at her. It didn't demand filling. At one point they stopped at a street stall, and he bought 2 paper cups of sweet potato latte without asking if she wanted one, and she accepted hers without commenting on it. And they stood there in the pale autumn sunlight drinking sweet potato latte and watching an old man paint watercolors of the rooftops. Can I ask you something? Muna said. Yes. Why didn't you just come to me 3 years ago? When you found me. Before I married him. Dae Haeun was quiet for a moment. I thought about it. He turned the paper cup slowly in his hands. But you didn't know me. And telling a stranger that her mother saved your father's life 20 years ago and that she's entitled to a significant inheritance, that sounds either absurd or like a scheme. It does sound like a scheme, Muna agreed. And you had just started seeing Derek. You seemed, he paused. You seemed happy. She looked at the old man painting. His brush moved in small, deliberate strokes. I wasn't, she said. Not really. But I thought I was. That's the worst kind of unhappy, Dae Haeun said quietly. She glanced at him. He was looking at the rooftops, not at her. There was something in his profile, some careful, private quality, that made her think he was not only talking about her. Were you, she said. Unhappy in that way? He took a sip of latte. For a few years, yes. What changed? He looked at her then. Just looked at her with those steady dark eyes, in the bright autumn light of a street that smelled like roasting chestnuts and cold air. I started paying attention to the right things, he said. Muna held his gaze for a moment. Then she looked away, because she was a woman in the middle of dismantling her husband's fraud, and she was not going to let herself get distracted, no matter how easy his silences were. Right, she said. Good advice. She heard him exhale, something almost like a quiet laugh. They kept walking. 9 days before the window closed, Derek made his move. He showed up at Attorney Han's office building. Not inside, Han's security would have managed that, but outside, on the pavement, where Muna was arriving for a morning meeting. She saw him before he saw her. For a fraction of a second, standing on that pavement with the city moving around them, she felt something old and complicated rise in her chest. Not love. Not anymore. But the ghost of it. The shape of a thing she had believed in. Then it was gone. He saw her and crossed the distance between them quickly. Muna. His voice was the one she recognized from their early years together. Warm. Careful. Curated. Please. Just 5 minutes. I have a meeting, she said. I know what you filed. I know what you think I did. He moved to block her path, not aggressively, but with the practiced ease of a man who had always used his size without acknowledging it. You're making this into something it isn't. If you'd just listened to me before you went running to some. Derek. Her voice was quiet and clear. Move. Muna. I have spent the last 2 weeks building a legal case that documents exactly what you did, precisely how you did it, and the paper trail you left doing it. Attorney Han has the injunction. She has Dr. Yun's financial records. She has the admission paperwork. She has my testimony from 7 days inside Byongmun. She looked at him steadily. You can stand on this pavement and talk to me for as long as you want. It will not change a single document inside that building. Derek's jaw tightened. The warm voice fell away. You have no idea what you're doing, he said. Low now. Different. I do, actually. She stepped around him. Goodbye, Derek. She didn't look back. Inside the elevator, the doors slid closed, and she leaned against the wall for 3 seconds and breathed. Her hands were shaking very slightly. Not from fear. From the particular physical cost of staying completely calm in front of someone who had once made her feel like her own mind couldn't be trusted. She straightened. 3rd floor. Attorney Han was waiting. She had work to do. Dae Haeun found out about the pavement encounter because Cece told him. Muna was still deciding how she felt about the fact that Cece and Dae Haeun had apparently developed a direct line of communication sometime in the past 10 days. He called her that evening. I heard Derek approached you this morning, he said. I handled it. I know. I'm not calling to check on you. A pause. I'm calling because I want to. There's a difference. Muna was sitting on the small balcony of the Mapogu apartment, her feet up on the railing, watching the lights of the city. The evening was cool. She had a blanket over her lap and a half-eaten bowl of ramen on the chair beside her. It was the most comfortable she had felt in weeks. Okay, she said. How are you? Genuinely? I'm eating cold ramen on a stranger's balcony, and it is the best I've felt in 2 years. She heard him laugh. A real laugh. Not the careful almost laugh from Buckshin. Something more open. That is a very specific measure of well-being, he said. I'm a specific person. You are. A pause. Muna. After this is over. Ask me after, she said. A beat of silence. Fair enough, he said. She smiled at the city lights. Good night, Dae Haeun. Good night. She hung up and picked up her ramen. The city glittered below her and she was, for the first time in a very long time, entirely herself. The filing landed on a Monday. Attorney Han submitted the full claim to the commercial court, beneficial ownership of 51% of Arium Group, supported by the original agreement, the testimony transcripts, the asset trace, and 3 additional documents from Dae Haeun's father's records that Han had described as simply devastating. By noon, Derek's legal team had been served. By 3, 2 of his board members had quietly requested a separate meeting with Attorney Han. By 5, Dr. Yun had contacted his own lawyer. Cece sent a voice note at 5:30 that was mostly unintelligible except for a repeated phrase that sounded very much like he is finished. Muna sat in Han's conference room and listened to the afternoon unfold with the quiet attention of a woman who had spent 7 days in a locked room making plans and was now watching every single one of them work. Han came in at 6 with 2 cups of coffee and the expression of a woman who did not often allow herself to be visibly pleased, but was currently making an exception. Derek's primary backer pulled out an hour ago, she said. The liquidation plan collapses without that funding. He has no path forward on Arium Group. She set the coffee down. His lawyer called at 5:40. They want to discuss a settlement. What does that mean? It means he's scared. Han sat down and looked at her client with something that was almost warmth. It means you won, Muna. Not completely. There is still court process ahead, still months of procedure. But structurally, he has no moves left. Muna wrapped both hands around the coffee cup. She thought about the night they dragged her out of her own home. She thought about the room with rails on the bed and artificial lavender and a lock on the outside of the door. She thought about palming tablets under her tongue and counting ceiling tiles and a young man named Femi who hummed while he mopped. She thought about her mother. A woman named Adiz who had told the truth in a room full of people who didn't want to hear it and never told her daughter and called her a small general anyway. Tell his lawyer, Muna said, that we are not interested in a settlement. We are going to court. And when we go to court, every document, every record, every admission paper and financial trace is going to be read into the public record. Han looked at her. You understand that will be a longer process. I understand. Muna looked back steadily. He put me in a room and told the world I was unstable. I want the world to know what he actually did. I want it on record. Permanently. Han was quiet for a moment. Then she picked up her own coffee, leaned back, and said, I was hoping you'd say that. 3 weeks later, the story broke publicly. A journalist Muna had never met published a piece that was careful, precise, and entirely sourced about the private psychiatric facility, about Dr. Haeun, about the forged admission documentation, and about a husband who had used a compromised doctor to remove a wife who had become inconvenient. By morning, it had been shared widely enough that Derek's name appeared in the trending searches before 9 a.m. His company's board issued a statement by noon. By the afternoon, 2 executives had resigned. Dr. Haeun surrendered his license voluntarily before formal proceedings could begin. His lawyer released a statement that used the phrase deep personal regret 4 times. Derek did not release a statement at all. He did not need to. Everyone had already read the documents. Muna watched it all from the small balcony in Mapogu, with coffee instead of ramen this time, because it was morning and she was celebrating in the small, private way she had always celebrated things quietly, alone, with full awareness of what the moment meant. Her phone buzzed. Cece, turn on the news. Right now. She turned on the news. She watched for a few minutes. Then she turned it off. She didn't need the news to tell her what had happened. She had built it, brick by brick, from a room with rails on the bed and a broken window latch and a folder of her mother's truth. She picked up her coffee again and looked at the city. Her city. She had forgotten, somewhere in those 2 years of being managed and curated and slowly made smaller, that she had always loved Seoul. The weight of it. The noise. The way it moved like it had somewhere important to be. She was ready to move with it again. He came to find her that evening. Not with paperwork, not with strategy, not through Cece or Attorney Han. He just came. Knocked on the door of the apartment in Mapogu at 7 in the evening with no advance warning and a paper bag that smelled like tteokbokki from the good place 2 streets over. She opened the door and looked at him. He held up the bag. I thought you might be hungry, Dae Haeun said. You thought right, she said. Come in. They ate at the small kitchen table. It was warm inside and cold outside, and the apartment smelled like the food they had brought in and the particular comfortable ordinary of an evening with nowhere to be. Halfway through, Muna looked up at him. Earlier, she said. On the phone. You said after this is over, ask me after. So I'm asking. He set down his chopsticks. He looked at her with the steady directness that she had decided was just who he was, not performance, not calculation. Just a man who looked at the things he wanted to look at and didn't look away. I'd like to know you, he said. Properly. Without the injunctions and the surveillance and the 19-day countdown. A pause. I have wanted to know you for 3 years, and I have been very patient. You have been extremely patient, she agreed. So, he looked at her. What do you say? Muna considered him across the small table. This quiet, careful man who had left a window unlatched for her, who had bought her sweet potato latte in the autumn sunlight, who had laughed at cold ramen and a stranger's balcony as a measure of happiness, and who had apparently decided 3 years ago, for reasons rooted in his father's gratitude and his own something more, that she was worth waiting for. I say, she said, that you still owe me a proper evening at the Midnight Orchid. Something moved across his face, warm and real and unhurried. Tomorrow, he said. Tomorrow, she said. She picked up her chopsticks. He picked up his. Outside, Seoul moved through the dark with somewhere important to be. And inside the small warm kitchen in Mapogu, something new and unhurried was beginning, not with a grand gesture or a declaration, but with tteokbokki and easy silence and 2 people who had found each other, finally, on the other side of a very long road. Some weeks later, Muna stood in the lobby of Arium Group's main building on a Tuesday morning. She wore a deep burgundy blazer and flat boots and a calm, clear expression. Behind her, Attorney Han carried a document case. Beside her, Dae Haeun stood with his hands in his pockets and said nothing because she had asked him to come and she had also asked him not to say anything. And he had agreed to both with the particular ease of a man who understood the difference between support and interference. The board was waiting. She walked in. She sat at the head of the table, her table, as it turned out, though she had never sat at it before, and she looked at the men who had spent 18 months moving pieces around a board they thought she didn't know existed. "Good morning," she said. "Let's talk about the future of this company." No one challenged her. The meeting took 2 hours. She had prepared for 4. By the end, 3 board members had requested to continue under her leadership and 2 had quietly indicated they would be resigning. She thanked them all. She was gracious about it. Her mother had been gracious. After, in the corridor, Dae Haeun fell into step beside her. "How do you feel?" he asked. She thought about it for a real moment. "Like myself," she said. "Fully. For the first time in a long time." He looked at her. That look she was learning, steady and warm and entirely unhurried. "Good," he said. She slipped her hand into his as they walked toward the elevator. He didn't say anything. He just held it. The elevator doors opened. They stepped in. And Muna, who had been locked away and lied to and quietly unmade, who had palm tablets under her tongue and climbed down a drainpipe and built her own truth out of documents and determination, stood in the mirrored light of that elevator and looked like exactly what she was. A woman who had come home to herself. And beside her, a man who had been waiting patiently for exactly that. And that is where we leave them. Not at a grand ceremony or a dramatic finale, but in a corridor and an elevator and a hand held quietly and a future that finally belonged to the people who deserved it. Because here is what this story teaches us. The people who try to make you doubt your own mind are rarely as powerful as they appear. They depend on your silence. The moment you decide to speak, to act, to gather your evidence, to climb down the drainpipe, their power begins to dissolve. Muna did not wait to be rescued. She built her own rescue, piece by piece, in the dark. And that is the kind of strength no one can lock away. Thank you so much for watching this story all the way to the end. If this video moved you, challenged you, or just kept you completely glued, please like this video right now, leave a comment telling me your favorite moment, and share it with someone who needs to hear a story about a woman who refused to stay down. Subscribe if you haven't already, and turn on notifications so you never miss what comes next. I will see you in the next one.